this first panel session will be focusing on the global AI landscape and the opportunities for Nigeria and by extension, Africa, all right? This first session will be focusing on the global AI landscape and the opportunities for Nigeria, by extension, Africa. But just quickly before I welcome the panel on stage, I'd like to take my very last question, aye or nay. If you just joined us, we played a game earlier on where I ask a question and the panel or the delegates reply with AI, which is aye or nay. The first question was, would you rather trust AI with public funds than politicians? The response was overwhelming. The second one was, would you rather go back to a time when we didn't have AI? Yet again, we had a majority saying nay. So if you're part of the people who said aye for that previous question about you going back to a time when we didn't have AI, I have this next question for you, and here it goes. This is for everybody, by the way, but for particularly for people who said nay earlier on. If you are assured of some control over AI, would you change your mind? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. Come on. Imagine you're representing Nigerians here, okay? For people who said they would like to go back to a time when they didn't have AI, the question is for you. If you are assured of some control, level of control over AI, would you change your mind? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. So the ayes have it. And that's what we're about to do right now. Talk about the control, how to navigate this interesting terrain. And the person who will be handling the panel is none other than the Director of Programs at CJID. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Akintunde Babatunde, the Director of Programs at CJID. This man is one of the most brilliant men you'll meet. He's energetic and he's looking dapper this morning. We talked about exchanging suits, so maybe we'll do that right afterwards. So Akintunde, over to you now.
Hello. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming for CJID's event. Today, we would be looking at the global AI landscape and the opportunities for Nigeria and Africa. But I would only be doing the moderation. The experts are in there who would take us through all of those. And to join me here would be Iyin Aboyeji, the Chief Executive Officer of Future Africa. Then to also join me is Adaora Ikenze, the Director of Public Policy at Meta. To also join the stage is Joshua Olufemi, the CEO of DataFight. And Dr. Olusola Ayoola, the CEO, Robotics and Artificial Intelligence, Nigeria. So, just a little background as to why this panel is important and the way it would flow. A lot of time when people get to hear AI these days, what only comes to mind is ChatGPT. But it's bigger than that. It's more than that. To get started would be Dr. Olusola Ayoola, who is the founder of Robotics and Artificial Intelligence Nigeria, known as Rain Robotics. He had a master's from the UK, and he's done a lot of work in helping to advance the knowledge of artificial intelligence and robotics in Nigeria. He's been a recipient of many awards, and including the United Nations Development Program, Chartered Institute of Accountants of Nigeria, Nigerian Society of Engineers, and the likes. What they will be doing this morning is to give us an overview of what is AI. I mean, centrally, what does it even mean? How does it work? And moving on from that, I will go to Iyin Aboyeji, who is known as the father of Unicorn, who was the co-founder Andela, and also co-founder Flutterwave. He's currently CEO of Future Africa. He's funded a lot of startups in Nigeria is helped develop tech talent in the country, and it would be giving us perspective on the knowledge and the talent that is needed for artificial intelligence disruption, not just in Nigeria, but Africa. What do we need? What are the opportunities? And how do we get that on? Then I will move on to Adaora Ikenze, who is the Director of Public Policy for Anglophone West Africa at Meta. And she's worked across Europe and the US as a lawyer and a development expert. She would be giving us perspective from the tech platform. How many of us have used Meta AI in recent time, both on WhatsApp, on Instagram, and other platforms? So she will be giving us perspective as to what Meta is doing, and also what opportunities are in there, and how do we take on that for the digital disruption. Then I will be moving on to Joshua Olufemi, who is the CEO of DataFight, who runs it's a research and data analytics company. He's also the founder of Go Local Analytics, and also led the development of an artificial intelligence tool for journalism, that's Nubia AI, who will be giving us perspective as to the data that is needed to train AI. Do we even have the data from here? How do we get on that? And what does that even mean for the media ecosystem? So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I won't be saying anything just to ask questions. So I would first get on Dr. Ayoola to give us an overview of what is AI and what does it even mean, and just in a few minutes. Thank you. You just have to press the button. No.
Doesn't show green. Oh.
It's better.
You just turned it on, okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be on this platform and to share a little bit about what I know on AI. Well, I've been in this for over 5 years now, training and all of that, so let's see how we can break this down in a way that you won't get lost. I tend to go very far because I'm also a lecturer at the University of Ibadan anyway, so bear with me. Now, AI is artificial intelligence, right? It's basically the ability of a computer system or a computer-based system to mimic the human brain in terms of comprehension, problem solving, and decision making. We are talking about a system that can handle issues as if it were a human being, but without the emotions and sentiments of humans. Even if it looks like it has some moral, it actually doesn't have any moral. It's just a mathematical algorithm. For instance, in secondary school, many of us may have done things like y equals mx plus c, right? Where you are told that, okay, if y equals 3x plus 4, what is y if x is 2? What is y if x is 7? Can I see your hands if you've ever done something like that before? Okay. You were wondering what it will be used for in the future. This is it. Now, in this kind of scenarios, X is basically the input, Y is the output. X is the situation, Y is the consequence. Or basically, cause and effect, input and output. For example, if you want to maybe pay someone's salary, and you consider X to be years of experience, and Y is the salary you will give the person, then that equation solves the problem. But in the real world, X is not just a scalar quantity. It's not just a number. It can be a vector. For example, your age might be a scalar, but your date of birth is a vector. I might tell you that someone who is 27 years old has the same age as someone else who is 27 years old. It looks like they have a similarity. But at the same time, someone born on the 25th of March, 1990, may have some similarity with someone born on the 25th of March, 2000. Fine, their years are not the same, but I can still see some similarities. So vector-wise, even though magnitude may not be the same, direction might be. And this is how we look at data in the world of AI. What you ate in the morning, afternoon, and evening is a vector. It shows me a trajectory. So it's not just one thing. So when I give a problem as y equals mx plus c, consider x as a vector. And x can be anything. It can be how much you earn, your gender, your location, your tribe, your religion, and so on. And with all of this in one X component, I can determine one or two things about you. Now, when we talk about AI, there are so many classifications of AI. There's the narrow AI, general AI, and super AI. Everything you have seen, even if it's mind-blowing to you today, it's all just narrow AI. The world is working towards general AI. General AI is an AI that can behave or think like a human, that can learn like a human. What you have today is just narrow AI that can do one or two tasks. Even ChatGPT is still narrow AI, even though it looks mind-blowing. Then there is the super AI that can do beyond what humans can do. That one only exists for now in the world of cartoons and all of that. But that's the one people think can take over the world. We are not there yet. Now, when I look at all of these things, narrow AI, what are the ones we have encountered? The very first one is called regression analysis, which can be linear regression for numbers or logistic regression for qualitative parameters. For example, should I go to the office today? Yes or no? That's a qualitative issue. And we can use AI to predict that. But that's just under regression. Once I have data about my life history, and I know that whenever I wake up on the right-hand side of my bed, that means I'm going to have a very good day at work, I can use that to predict whether I should go to the office or not. That's data. And whenever I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, I might be thinking, oh, I shouldn't go. That is still part of logistic regression. Data is key in that. Then we have another one called supervised and unsupervised. So we can talk about all of these things. There's so much in this. But I want to bring out one or two things because of time. Recommender systems is a part of machine learning that tries to study your behavior to understand better how to keep you interested. And you've seen that in TikTok. You've seen that in Google, on YouTube, and so on. You just use the system. It picks every activity of yours. What you clicked, how long you watched this video, what pages you actually visited, and it keeps giving you content that would suit your interest. And that way, you are glued to it. Now, that is called recommender systems, and companies are actually deploying that in AI, in their activities to keep their customers glued to it. Then there is the other one called time series forecasting, also machine learning. With time series forecasting, you can predict what's going to happen in the next 20 years, in the next 10 years. We use that a lot for weather forecasting. But that's because weather seems to be something that can be predicted. But there are some things that you don't think can be predicted, but can actually be predicted if you study the data over some years. And that is one thing we're not doing enough of in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say that.
There.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll come back to you, but I think that, apologize if there was confusion with the X and Y. We are together, even though I studied mathematics. But but I would go to Iyin Aboyeji because what I was going to ask you is that, so it's giving us like how it works from the back end, the backstage. And a lot of the narrative is that AI would take jobs away from people. There is also the other side of the conversation that says that for every X number of jobs that is lost to AI, there will be extra level of jobs that will be created. So the first question, I will ask you two questions in one. The first one is, are there problems in Nigeria and Africa that AI can help solve? Two, where do we find the talent? The talent to get on the AI train and help us solve the problem.
Thank you very much for having me here. And many people don't know this, but in my former life, I used to be a journalist. I actually ran a newspaper. So one of the things, I'm going to speak from a business perspective. Haven't run a newspaper, it was a college newspaper. I had $1 million in revenue. And I remember when I assumed leadership of the newspaper, we made this painful but now seemingly obvious decision to move from publishing a weekly paper once a week to going WordPress. And there were so many concerns, this is going to destroy our business model, advertisers won't come, so on and so forth. I mean, now, it would, all those excuses sound a little bit insane, right? And I see AI the same way, because it's a big technology shift. Ultimately, the reality of the media landscape we've been forced into is one where everybody needs to be all things to all people at all times for the most amount of eyeballs. And I think what AI is going to make possible is a world where you can actually take the long tail of knowledge and information and monetize that. And it's going to happen in a few ways. I think the first thing is, ultimately, AI is going to reduce barriers, my opinion, barriers to productivity. You asked a question about talent. Today, we know what we require for us to create world-class journalism, right? And the reality is that we don't have the resources or the income or the business case to train for that kind of talent in Nigeria. But the beauty of AI is that because we have AI, we can raise the bar perhaps a bit more and easier than we used to. If you train a newsroom on, on just, okay, find the facts and do a little bit of prompt engineering so you can sound like this publication. That's all possible to do today with even the cheapest, freest version of ChatGPT. Just a little bit of prompt engineering training, and your guys can sound like FT without ever stepping foot outside of their local government, right? They might not even be able to speak good English, but they can write like FT because you just tell ChatGPT, style this article like it's an article from FT. But that's one side of it. The other side of it, I think AI finally gives journalism a business model. Because for the longest time, let's be honest, we've not had one. The people we sell information to are not the people who buy products from us, i.e. ad space. In fact, we attempt to sell our audience to those people. But for the first time, and you can see it with what's happening with Reddit, you can see it with what is happening with the lawsuits with New York Times and OpenAI, where we're going is where companies like Meta, we don't have to beg them anymore to include us somehow. If their AI uses information, research, insights that we've unearthed from public context, they will be forced to adopt a business model where they pay us. And I think that's the biggest opportunity in journalism. But it's only going to work for those people who are willing to go deep. So if you're the kind of, if you want to build a soft sell financial journalism paper, you know what I mean, where you're just wrapping out facts that are not really facts because you feel like nobody's going to pay for facts and depth and intelligence and insight, you're not going to benefit because nobody's looking for that kind of information. AI can generate that information without anybody else's help. But if you're willing to become an expert and put out unique insights that nobody else will be able to get, all of a sudden you have a business model because whenever AI needs to answer questions that have to do with that area, they have to consult your resources. And if they consult your resources, especially if the knowledge is unique, all of a sudden, you have to get paid. And that's where a one-man journalism shop can net $10 million a year, simply because it's the only credible source of great information about Nigerian stock market's behavior. And I think for us in Africa, that is our opportunity. The world, the only undiscovered continent, despite what Mungo Park might have claimed to do, is Africa. And so those who are able to unearth context and data about Africa at depth are the only sources of information. New York Times is not going to send people down here to get that information, right? Google, Facebook, they have no interest, right? They're just platforms. So this is the data that only you can get, and that gives you your advantage. The third thing is language. The biggest challenge I feel with our country is that we talk a lot at each other. I almost feel like, and I was talking about that with my big auntie just earlier, Auntie Kadaria, that there's no one Nigeria. There's probably like 12 to 15 Nigerias. right? It's what makes this market very interesting for me as a venture capitalist. And the truth of the Nigerias is that there's every kind of Nigeria, there's every kind of Africa in Nigeria. Like in Lagos, there's Cape Town in Lagos. If you don't believe, I can show you some places. There's Joburg in Lagos, there's New York in Lagos, there's Paris in Lagos. Well, there's also Okokomaiko in Lagos, right? There's Makoko in Lagos. There's, so whether you're looking for extreme poverty or extreme wealth, it exists. And you don't have to get a visa to see it. But the biggest thing about our tribal groups, right, is that language language codifies our worldview, but AI can break through languages, especially when we think about things like language AI, being able to translate from one, in context, from one language to the other. It can bring together different perspectives and give a more balanced view that is both data-based but also extremely qualitative. And I think that's the biggest opportunity with AI on the continent, is that if we're able to actually bring these perspectives together, we can unearth more knowledge, more intelligence, more insights, and then we can monetize those insights and build a real business of journalism.
Yeah, thank you very much. Even though you haven't answered the question of talent, but I would come...
Well, my point is you don't need it anymore.
Right.
Yeah, what you need now is tools and skills.
Right.
You don't need talent. There's nothing like talent anymore in journalism.
Right.
Do you have the skills, right? And do you have access to the tools?
Right.
Now, can you tell a story? That's gone, because AI can tell a story much better than you can. Fuad would disagree, but that's my point of view. I can tell AI to write like Fuad. I just copy and paste one of Fuad's articles. I write the data, and AI will give me Fuad's flowery language.
Okay, the good thing is that there will be a panel that would look into that, and then we would see Fuad. That will be an opportunity to probably respond to that. All right, thank you very much. So I will go to Adaora, because I think you sort of mentioned a few points about tech platforms, and I think I would go to Adaora with the language opportunity, but probably start with what Meta is doing within the global AI revolution, and very clear. Then give specific examples of what is happening in Nigeria and Africa, and talk about the language strategy that Meta has in helping to ensure that codification of those languages becomes an opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for the invitation to be part of this conference, and I'm not so sure that I warrant being on this stage, but I will do my best. It's interesting that my fellow panelists started off talking about the fact that AI is not new. And I like the fact that when people think about Meta, they don't actually realize that Meta has always been an AI company. The fact that we have been able to give the platforms and the products that we have to the world is predicated on the foundation of AI that Facebook, now Meta, has always built on. So this new identity, it's not necessarily new internally, it might be new externally, but it is simply an extension of what we have always done. We have always been a company that has been grounded in the technology of artificial intelligence. To be able to service at the scale that we have been doing, that was the only way, anyway, that we could have done that. You asked about the language question and how Meta is supporting the growth of AI in Africa. The first thing is that we have always been very intentional that the foundation of artificial intelligence, the large language learning models, must be open source. It goes a little bit to what Iyin was saying, that foreign companies will not come down to different localities to be able to get the nuances. Recognizing the fact that there is limited financial and sometimes technical capabilities to build the kind of models that will serve respective countries and, and localities. Meta has always said that the large language models which underpin AI systems should be open source. And our large language models, similar to ChatGPT, which produce things like ChatGPT, have always been open source. I know that in Nigeria, there are a number of, well, there is actually one government agency, and there are a number of experts that are actually using the Llama models. We have Llama 1, Llama 2, Llama 3, and we're going to bring out Llama 4 as well. But these are open source models that can be used to build artificial intelligence systems across all sorts of sectors, from education to health, to agricultural modeling, to energy planning, to transportation. They are accessible to anybody and everybody. Another thing is we have always also provided support for things that people don't necessarily think are AI. So Meta has a program called Data for Good, which is the precursor of what people understand to be AI models, public AI models. And these models have always been available. The Rural Electrification Agency of Nigeria has used it when Nigeria was building its energy planning tool. They used it. There are data sets that give you information around population density, poverty maps, electrification, etc., and things like that. And when it comes to, again, providing access around the language issue, Meta is part of a coalition that has launched the No Language Left Behind program, which is an open source model that provides translation, direct translation, across over 200 languages. And I'm very happy to say that there are several Nigerian languages that are included in that as well. I mean, there's a lot more I can talk on, but I'll stop there.
Right, thank you very much. So many people who use Facebook here, like myself, when you write something on Facebook in Yoruba and you check what Meta would translate in English, we'll come back to that. So thank you very much, Adaora. I think it's important to set that context. I will go to Joshua. And Joshua, Iyin was saying something about how journalists who are able to write very quality material could potentially be, products that they could sell to tech companies. So let's talk about, the data gap in Nigeria and, of course, in Africa that is potentially what would feed into the AI model to solve local problems that would help, to localize the reality. So what would you say to the current data gap that we have, and what opportunities are in there for the AI market?
Thank you so much, Akintunde. I guess I'll start by, what we say as a slang, to burst your bubble, to say that you have so much gap in terms of data that you need to train AI in Nigeria or anywhere else. I think that's the first, misinformation that we need to, first of all, clear. There is enough to train, like the math lecturer, was trying to do, right? When he spoke about recommenders, it's just a little bit, you just need a little bit to train, more or less like a sample. So the question is, do we have enough sample to train? How much do you need? Adaora was also mentioning how that the data that is available, Data for Good initiative, is enough to train. I guess it was the same thing that started, and you will know this, Akintunde, when we started data journalism training across Nigeria, and journalists would say, we don't have data. And I said, no. Even World Bank had said almost 15 years ago that Nigeria has over 60 to 70% data available to do enough. However, the capacity, which conflicts with what Iyin was saying, or the dimension that he was putting it, which is, yes, there is the capacity of AI to do this work, to be able to make me write like, the economist or FT or any other person, right? However, if there's lack of knowledge for people to know that should be done, that's enough, talent development that needs to happen. And I think that's probably where to take it from. Ability to harness, ability to extract this data. She mentioned what Ari was able to do. How far can everyday Nigerian, how well do your technologists in Nigeria know how to use this data? I think it's where you start to see the gap between knowledge and users or creators or people who harness the data. I feel that that's one place to take it from. The other is infrastructure, right? Of course, you've seen the MSide minister going about talking about the need to lay fiber optics. So if you don't have the infrastructure enough to be able to harness or deploy the data for AI use, you also have a big challenge there. Infrastructure to be able to take satellite imagery data, for instance, and then deploy it into AI for agriculture, health, and the rest of them. I think, or climate change is probably another data gap. Now, let me go back to what everybody probably wants me to say about the gap. I think the gap is how real time do we have this data? How much of inclusivity do we have in the data that we have available? I guess that's another gap. How much of, when we say language data, Nigeria has over 300 languages. I've looked around, the ones that are being used to train AI today are probably just about 3 or 4. If you take Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo, Fufude, Efik, right? I don't think you have more than that. But you have an entire, population of over 20 million. If you take the Nigerian North Central, that you've not captured their own language, right? Go to Plateau, Kogi. So you have gap in those areas, and I feel that's where, the conversation should really go to. How do you reach those people who don't have access, to the languages that are leading, and how do we ensure that their own children, their own, demography is also catered to as AI begins to do what it's able to do. The other one, which is also...
Yeah, so you could just finish your thought.
Okay, is, I guess, the work that Fuad is doing, which is the data that is already available, but that is trapped on paper, right? That has not been digitized, that has not been, made accessible. You have 150 years of, journalism that has been done in Nigeria that, even if I ask Adaora about, the Punch of 2001, she probably will be looking for libraries and everywhere to get it. Why do we need to go and use FT's data? Because it's digital, right? Why do we have to use the economics data? Because it's digital. Where's Punch? Where's Tribune? 70 years of journalism. That's the data that we need to extract. That's the data that I think is the gap that we need to be able to bring back and feed AI with.
Thank you very much, Joshua. I think I'll come back to you on the dimension, but I would go back to Dr. Ayoola. And so I think there has been a lot of talk about opportunities in the media. So Dr. Ayoola, we have a lot of people here who probably are interested in AI adoption in the health sector, AI adoption in the agric sector. What are the opportunities? What are the current use cases that we can pinpoint in Nigeria to say, okay, this is an example of AI-driven initiative that's improving the health sector? If we don't have that already, what are the ideas you think you could share on how AI could potentially disrupt healthcare, agric sector, climate change, and all of those? Dr. Ayoola.
Thank you very much. It's unfortunate that you are pushing me out of the journalism discussion. But
you could come back to it, but I think Iyin and Joshua.
At least health is wealth. Now, on the issue of healthcare, it's important to agree that data is key in this. I've met with a number of medical practitioners who are, data-driven and all of that, because it's one thing to predict, to diagnose a particular person and then prescribe a treatment, but then how often do our medical practitioners take note of how effective these drugs were for whoever took them? What's their blood type? And so on and so forth. I had a researcher who was looking at genomics, something like that, about the genes of different people and how they react to different drugs. Because whether you like it or not, we are a consumer economy, so to say, in the sense that whatever is approved abroad, we agree with it. We don't do our own extra research. to see how efficacious it is in our own climb. So with that kind of medical research into how our own genes and so on aligns with the drugs we are taking, that is an area of research that medical professionals are looking at. Not many of them are looking at that anyway, just a few. And then secondly, in the aspect of fake drug detection, at least, was it not 5 years ago, one of our Nigerians, Adebayo Longe, developed an AI solution for detecting fake drugs. And immediately he discovered that, he got invested in, and he's now in Canada. He has a company called RXO. What does that company do? It tracks drugs that were manufactured, the barcodes and all of that. And then whenever you buy them, you go on the website, type in your barcode and see if this is one of the actually approved, the authentic drugs, or maybe what do we call it now? An adulterated version of it. Which, of course, you know, in Nigeria, was it not just a year ago we had several issues of drinks that were not even supposed to be in the market, different names and all that. So in the case of healthcare, but looking at what is obtainable abroad in the area of image scanning, AI is being utilized already in that area, but a lot needs to still be done to improve its accuracy, because while it is okay to try it, it's always to be said that, hey, this may not be accurate. It was AI generated. For instance, at some point in UK, there was a news in 2019 about a medical facility that was diagnosing people of certain cancer based on AI prediction. Whereas it got to a point they discovered that that was not actually accurate. About 20% of the predictions were wrong. Now, who got the wrong prediction? What eventually traumatized them? Was it the actual ailment or the thought of it? And that was a far-reaching. So I would understand that in the medical practitioner, it's possible to slow down on the adoption of AI for critical decisions, but for certain areas like detecting fake drugs, at least chatbots, medical chatbots for people who refuse to go for actual medical consultations, to be able to have some personal interactions with their chatbot. I think that's an opportunity in the medical field we need to adopt. But like I would emphasize, the aspect of medical practitioners taking data, taking note of the symptoms do I call them clients now, their patients, reports, and the drugs that were given will help to improve the efficacy of drugs in the future. Thank you.
Right, yeah, thank you very much. I think, apologies if you think I took you out of journalism, but I think that was helpful. I will just go to Iyin, and my question would be on collaboration, because the internet, from the early days, all of those things are collaborative in nature, right? And for instance, ChatGPT was created as utility tool for every industry. We don't have very specific, industries developing their own AI tool, right? For instance, how do we get a medical doctor, who's tech inclined to develop, their own, and because the general conversation around regulation. So what do we say on very specific industries developing and building their tools? How do we ensure collaboration in a way that government regulation, civil society, the media, all of those come together to ensure that the AI ecosystem is participatory?
Absolutely. Right before, I'm going to address that question, but I want to clarify something based on one of the comments I heard earlier, which is that I'm not saying there's nothing like talent in journalism. I'm saying talent now has to be redefined from storytelling to actually having the knowledge, skills, and tools to be able to make sense of data, right? So it's not just about storytelling, words, people who can quote Shakespeare anymore. It's now about, can you actually give decision makers information that can help them analyze? Which brings me to the question that you're asking. I think data is going to be the biggest point of collaboration. This is a big country. There's a lot of data that has to be unearthed. And unless the industry can come together to say, you know what, we are going to collaboratively create a data warehouse or a data dump that then allows each of us to be able to, on the basis of our insights, knowledge, and tools, draw a particular inference that can then allow us to tell stories that help decision makers or that help society understand what is actually going on, it's going to be very difficult because the organizations that you're up against, they have billions of dollars, right? The project that Fuad is working on digitizing old newspapers, personally, it should be an industry effort. I think it's a lack of leadership that the industry is not collaborating around that, because that is literally the data that if a Google or a Meta by mistake decides to fund that, it puts all of us out of business. Because 100 years, 150 years of newspaper data in Nigeria, right? Individually, how much will we negotiate? Whatever amount we put there is peanuts, right? Facebook can wake up tomorrow and say, look, you know what, I think, Fuad, since they've all given you permission, take 15 million, share it. Each of us will get $1 million and we'll go and sit down, right? And we're happy. But if we all came together as an industry, got the resources to actually develop it as a repository, every time Google, Facebook, New York Times, FT quotes a piece of data from that repository, they have to pay us $1. If they do it 250, and there's no chance, right, that they're not going to quote that historical data multiple times in a week, in a year, in a month, you know? So think about the huge amount of value that creates for the entire industry, just simply by taking that 150 years of newspaper data and digitizing it. Those are the kind of efforts that we have to take. We have 36 states. All of us have correspondents in those 36 states. Why do we not have an inflation? Government does not have accurate data. I can tell you for free. Every time we look at their data always has errors. Always. The other day, I remember I saw one balance of payments chart, and somehow it got into it that we're spending $5 billion on arms. This is public data. I was like, $5 billion on arms? Like, is it World War III that we are doing in Nigeria? And when you went and looked at the data, you realize that actually somebody saw 5 billion naira, added dollar to it. That's the kind of data that we all write news on. But because they give it to us as press releases, we don't ask questions. I'm exaggerating, but 90% of the data you get from government is probably wrong. And not wrong as in they're lying, just wrong as in there are errors in the data. What kind of effort is the industry making to clean up that data and make sure it's usable for reporting? You talk about, just a final example about collaboration on this subject of data again. How are we thinking as an industry about tapping into particular knowledge bases and expertise around specific subject matter? Sometimes I read stories in the newspaper about what's going on with laws being passed in parliament. And I'm like, this person clearly doesn't understand the subject matter, right? And doesn't understand what they're actually saying. There's actually a treasure trove of data being generated every day by the National Assembly that is unexposed to the public. But there are a lot of businesses that literally would pay, at the very least, they'll pay thousands of dollars, right, for access to that information properly presented, because it helps them forecast what regulatory action will happen. Again, it's an area our journalists ignore. So just saying that the industry is losing so much by not collaborating. This industry could easily be a trillion naira industry, but we are all shortchanging ourselves because we are all replicating it. So now they just bulk pay us, right? And for ads, bulk pay us. Oh, Tribune, this, that. But the ads are useless. I mean,
right.
What we need is, how do we come together, coalesce around our data, make it useful for decision making, so that these companies are paying us more than their marketing budget.
Right. But thank you very much, Ian. I think a lot of the industry perspective would also be discussed in the other panel. So I would just go to Adaora, and there is an example from Canada that I would probably use to contextualize my question. So a few years ago, there was a law in Canada that states that the digital disruption is affecting the news industry, and that there will be some certain financial concession from Meta to the news industry. But at some point, there was a pushback, and there was an argument. I'm not sure how much, I'm not sure about this, but it was like Meta was saying the links to news that features on Meta platform, Facebook, for instance, they are not, so they're not big deal, so they can't make such financial commitments. So bringing it back to Nigeria, a lot of news platforms, they rely on social media for distribution of content. Is there a current, strategy by Meta to support that ecosystem? And if there are some, you probably could share. If there are plans for that, it would be interesting to hear. Thank you.
So I'm not sure how this relates to artificial intelligence.
So so the connection to artificial intelligence is the fact that the content from platforms, news media, they're used to train AI model. That's the connection to it.
Okay, so there's a manner in which media companies utilize social media. So you don't just an offline publication will create its own social media page and post its content. Yeah. Now the question as to whether once that content is posted, it becomes it's no longer proprietary, and it is now publicly available information, is not something that we don't have the time to go into here. There's also the question of how Meta trains its language models. Now, to date, the models have had very little training on media sources, and the manner in which the information on which the language models are being trained when it comes to media sources varies depending on the regulation and the manner of engagement between the social media platforms, and it's not just Meta, and the media publications. It is a much, much longer conversation for this forum.
Okay, that's helpful. I think I'll thank you very much for that perspective. I'll come back for your closing thoughts, but I'll go to Joshua to ask him. So he talked about data. I wanted to ask, what standards and best practice do you think should be followed to ensure data reliability and consistency, for AI projects in Nigeria? I think he spoke about a lot of disjointed efforts. So what are the standards do you think should be followed in ensuring that data that's needed for training AI models is reliable and consistent?
I mean, I wanted to, on the lighter note, say maybe we should be talking to, Standard Organization of Nigeria, but I mean, I guess to look at it from the nature of data itself, right? You can then derive how best, you can work around reliability. First is that data will always evolve, so which means you need to do a lot of updating, you need to do a lot of, versioning, such that what was true before, if it changes, you are able to, quickly, work around that. I think that's the first thing I would say. The other would be also the structure, or what I'll call data governance. I like to always just break things down, which is how do we ensure that the data, the format, the file system that you're using, right, align very well with, it's scalable and it's agile. I think it's something to look at. Importantly also is also now using the word standard, standardizing the way that everyone trains, right? I think is important, and it's one thing we need to really look at, especially when government also wants to venture into procurement of, AI tools or technology, right, to ensure that there is a standardization that you're going through. How was this data trained? Was it inclusive enough? Was it participatory in the first place, how it is being done? I guess that's something to look at. The other thing which is going into the social dimension of it is also ensuring that there's compensation. I guess that's the conversation you were trying to have with Adaora. There's compensation for data subjects and data contributors, which also ties to what he was, nudging, the media leadership to start to look at, right? The people whose data you're using to train, right? What compensation are they getting today? Because you offered me a platform to post my content, when you're using it again, what's the conversation that we're having? Is it the same terms and agreement that I signed 20 years ago when I logged on to Google, blah, 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 that is still used to say you own, it's a social enterprise, so it's a social good that we're doing. I think that's one thing to look at. And it brings me back to the conversation about what Iyin was saying about collaboration. New York Times is able to take, OpenAI to, court to say we want some compensation for our work. Who is having that conversation for African publishers, right? Who is having that conversation for, so that's the part about, when you talk about the ethics or the standardization of data that is used to train, you want to ensure that you're thinking about that conversation around who's compensating who. I guess that's
thank you, Joshua. I think if you have other thoughts, you could just use that as your closing thought. Dr. Ayoola, I want to hear your closing thoughts, but I want you to touch on AI inequality, the global north versus global south divide in your wrapping thoughts, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, I think the very first thing I want to talk about is the issue of data, because this is a global discussion.
Sorry, in 1 minute.
In 1 minute? Okay. Okay, here is it. Journalists, I'm sure you can expand on this. I do not agree that we should start paying for the data we use in training our AI models. We are building a so-called human, and I cannot begin to pay every author of the books I have used to become intelligent. We have to allow people to supply data that can be used. The benefit for them is that their own philosophy will reflect in the AI technology we will see in the future. If you prevent people from using your data, you're not going to see a reflection of your thought process in an AI system that will eventually be the decision maker in the future. So I think we should allow for AI developers to utilize available data without having to pay for it.
Thank you very much. Do you agree? Your closing thoughts.
Well, I don't entirely agree, and I'll tell you that are my closing thoughts. The reality is that every book that is in your hand should have been paid for, whether by you or by somebody else. And that has to apply to journalism as well. So whether it's going to be the AI platforms paying us a subscription for all their users to be able to glean from the knowledge, or it's the individual paying for the particular information, somebody must pay. And my closing thought is this. Data inequality is an advantage for us in Africa. And journalists, media, today and tomorrow, have an opportunity to lead the revolution, because your job is literally data, it's information. We need to leave behind this business model of people, our subjects, paying us to post on their behalf, because they're not giving us useful information. And we need to transition back to our original mission as an industry, which is educating the public. And the beautiful thing is, if we actually focus on that, we will make far more money.
Right.
So that's what I want to end with.
Thank you very much, Adaora. What should we be expecting from Meta in the next couple of days
I think
on AI?
This monetization conversation is very, very, very interesting. But I will start by my very quick point is that as with all Meta products, Meta gives you the platform. We've done it with open source. we've done it with Llama. So perhaps the idea that Meta is going to come and pay every journalist in Nigeria for their data might be a little bit far-fetched, because what we've done is we've given the tools so that large language models to build the artificial intelligence that will provide that model for information sharing is already in your hands. We are not going to come and take the data from you. We've given you, the nuts and bolts to build it for yourself. And the conversation will most likely not happen with Meta. It will happen with one of the venture companies that Iyin is funding that wants to use the 150 years of data to build a platform for information. The second thing is what can Nigeria and Africa expect? Over the last 2 years, we have had grants to support artificial intelligence models in Africa. We had the Llama 2 grants, the impact grants that supported companies and individuals that were building solutions around education, climate, and social good. Today, we are announcing the second iteration of those grants, and they will be supporting individuals again and organizations that are using our Llama model to build solutions around education, agriculture, climate change, safety and security, healthcare. Look out for that as well.
Thank you. We look forward to that. And Joshua, what would you say to the next couple, what are the opportunities in the next couple years, in the next couple days for the media industry and for every sector when it comes to adopting AI, open source model like Adaora just mentioned?
I'm going to be a little bit theoretical. I guess the first opportunity is what you mentioned. We need to be very proactive about collaboration. We ain't going nowhere alone. I can place my money on it. The conversation we'll be having about, how do we work as one industry that remains endangered with every tech? I think that's the first one. The second one is capacity. You kept saying this, right? If you don't have the skills and the knowledge to move forward, there's no 10 years time than we, having this same old conversation again. And I think the last one is, we need to have more conversations like this, and I don't think in big rooms where we can have back and forth, where we bring the technologies to come and explain how platforms is all that is, how we, the owners of intellectual property, we've endangered the life, we've gone to prisons, do all of this just to make that information intelligent enough, and how that's all that we have. Those conversations need to happen. And I think the final thing I would say is we need a community of practice around journalism and AI.
Right. Thank you very much, Joshua. And I think that this is perhaps a very good place to leave this and allow, because it's the conversation starter, it's the way that we have been able to bring perspective from every expert. So I would say very many thanks to Iyin Aboyeji for making it today. Thank you very much, Adaora, for giving us such very brilliant perspective. Thank you, Dr. Ayoola, for helping us with the X and Y conversation, reminding us of our trauma from secondary school days. And thank you very much, Joshua, for that perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure hosting this expert, and enjoy the rest of the conversation.